You're watching Shalom TV, celebrating all things Jewish.
I want to think with you about the enormous achievements of Seriously Jewish Camping over the past few years. But even more, I want to think with you about the possibilities that such camps offer for Jewish education, for building Jewish identity, and as a source of Jewish community. I'm especially honored to be here at FJC, with our colleagues from Jim Joseph Foundation, with my friends Richard and David, and with all of you, as the head of JTS, the institution which some 60 plus years ago founded Camp Ramah, has been sponsoring it since, and I can tell you, under my chancellorship, is going to find equally bold ways of growing Ramah in the coming years, deepening its connection to day schools, congregational schools, and to Israel, and adopting the phenomenally successful model of Jewish camping to the generation that tweets and blogs and multitasks and embraces changes so fast that the rest of us don't know how to keep up. One of the most rewarding parts of my job as Chancellor of JTS is to bring JTS Ramah and Ramah still closer together, and to think with my colleagues at the Davidson School and the rest of JTS of how experiential Jewish learning of the sort that does so well for us at camp can be transferred, as a kind of technology can be transferred, to do well for us in every site of Jewish learning, and to use that camp as a basis for all sorts of other things throughout North America and beyond. I think it's fair to say, as a scholar of American Judaism, as a Jewish educator, as a leader of one of the fine institutions of American Jewish life, there is nothing you and I can do together in the next few years for building the future of Jewish life and Jewish identity and Jewish education that is more important than getting more kids to good Jewish camps. That is our task. Our tradition will be the better for it. Our community will be the better for it. And I'm convinced our society will be the better for it as well. And what I'm going to do for the next few minutes I'm going to talk for the next few minutes about the theoretical sources of that claim. Why is this so? I'm going to talk about two theoretical sources for what I'm saying, the first of which is Torah. Look, why are we here? I think we Jews are here to build Jewish communities, to carry forward a tradition called Torah that helps us serve as God's partner in the task of making this world better, more decent, more just, more compassionate. And to that end of covenant, we weren't chartered as a religious group alone. We were made a people, which means a set of global and local communities. Because communities can do things that individuals can't do by themselves. Communities can persuade you of the right and the true, even against the flow of a society which doesn't think that. Communities can help you gather strength, can elicit your finest efforts, can teach you to reach higher. The Torah demands and makes possible, I think, a kind of wholeness for which we yearn. Heart and soul and mind, all engaged. And as every wise educator knows, when you teach lessons that you want to be real life lessons, that want to take hold of a person, especially when those lessons go against the grain of a society, against the taken for granted assumptions of the larger culture, the teaching must be operative 24/7, when you lie down and when you rise up. It must occupy not only your private space and time, but your public space and time, sitting in your house and walking upon the way. And that's where camping in North America rises to the occasion of dealing with a reality, a challenged reality, that for the most part does not place Jews, Jewish adults or Jewish kids, inside Jewish gates or Jewish doorposts for the majority of their lives. The Jewish part of life is generally off to the side, marginal to the main business of life. And so you need to create a counter-reality, such as a 24/7 Jewish camp, where sports takes place in Jewish space, where drama and arts take place in Jewish time, where Torah is studied surrounded by Jews and images of Jews, and filling your life and filling Jewish life with fun. We know from some of the finest sociologists of our time, people like Peter Berger, what it takes to create a social reality or a plausibility structure to go against the stream. Educational theorists, developmental psychologists have explained over and over why giving kids space and time away, safely away from their parents' supervision, can have the remarkable effect of making those kids committed to their parents' values like nothing else in the world. Camp experiences last a lifetime. Camp experiences make parents jealous that they can't be at camp. It makes them wish their synagogues were more like camp. It makes them wish their friendships were more like the friendships they nurtured at camp. So if you care, as we all do, about raising new generations of committed Jews of all varieties, I think you want a Jewish world, like camp, where Jewish kids can come to be at home in their world, including the natural world, at the same time as they learn to be at home inside their own skins. Where Jewish space is a place where they can grow, and they can grow more confident. Where they come alive in the company of other Jewish kids, and Jewish role models only several years older come alive intellectually and emotionally and, yes, sexually. Where teens quickly reach bedrock of self that they can be confident of ever after. Where Hebrew and Israel and even davening are part of the culture, not part of the counterculture. Where campers and junior staff learn from one another and not from books, supervised by teacher role models just a few years older than they are, so they can aspire to be role models too, they can aspire to be leaders, and I'm sure you've all seen the study prepared by Jack Wertheimer for Avichai of just how many Jewish leaders in contemporary North America were nurtured at Jewish camp. And finally, the particular genius of Camp Ramah, you want a place where education is for the staff at every level and not just for the kids, where education is given pride of place, and where, thanks to initiatives like the Ramah Service Corps, we can now bring the spirit of camp and the methods of camp and the aspirations of camp to Jewish kids and communities around the continent, and so interest more young people in joining the magic of camp for themselves. Well, you can see I've only been chancellor for 5 years, but I have certainly drunk the Kool-Aid. I've got it. I believe it. Anyone who cares about Jewish community believes this. I've learned from my colleagues at JTS's Experiential Learning Initiative, one of our proud programs sponsored by the Jim Joseph Foundation, that you don't have to be at a place like camp to do experiential learning. You can do it in classrooms where you sit in rows and spend time reading books until the bell rings. You can do that, but it's a lot harder. Because if you want to do experiential learning, you want multiple faculties employed and not just the mind. You want reflection of the whole self. Experiential learning thrives on passion. It takes good advantage of hormones. It takes time, raucous dining halls, baseball, water you can swim and dive in. That's where we find ourselves today. We want to transform Jewish lives, not just 1 day a week or 2 hours a week, but 7 days a week. We want to do things in a summer that lasts throughout the year and last a lifetime. We know that it takes more than camp alone. We know that you can make a huge impact on day schools and congregational schools and all sorts of venues of Jewish education by putting more Jewish educators out there, training them better, and teaching them the skills of experiential learning. We know that Jewish camps can't do the job alone. It takes Jews in our world beyond camp to show that they care about living Jewishly, that they too will build communities, that they too will learn Torah. But what a difference camp makes. As the chancellor of JTS, as a scholar of contemporary Judaism, as a caring Jew, I thank Jim Joseph Foundation and the FJC and everyone else in this room who's helping us to build camps and sustain camps and bring more Jewish kids and counselors to camps, bring them in ever-increasing numbers with ever greater quality. Those of us who run the training institutions for Jewish educators and teachers, we can play a role in this. We pledge to you today that we will play this role. But it's going to take all of us to do this job. It's going to take a generation of Jews faced with an opportunity that may not come again to make a difference to the Jewish community, the Jewish people, and Judaism that's going to last for many generations after. Believe me, when people look back 50 years from now, they're going to thank us for it. In the meantime, I thank you very much.
I thank Arnie very much for his words. I feel a little bit at the moment as if, in fact, Chancellor Eisen has said it all, but not all of us have said it.
That was my line.
So that I suspect Richard and Chip and others will have a few more things to say. Let me begin just with a couple of personal remarks about camp itself. It is a pleasure to be here today with so many friends who I've known from so many different dimensions of my life. To look in the front row, the Bildners, Leif, Joel, Paula, a number of you who I've known for many years and had the pleasure to be with in any number of settings. But I would be remiss if I didn't say a particular word about my friend Skip Vignes. In many ways, and Jeremy, you should know this, it may well be that the interest in camping on Skip's part was actually fostered at Camp Kadima, which is non-denominational. Alan, wherever you're sitting here at JCC Camp in Newport News, Virginia, I suppose it could be proud to say that among its alumni are David Ellenson and Skip Vignes. When you look at both of us today, kind of have to imagine us as 3-year-olds and what we must have been doing in that camp and in that kindergarten. But the reality is that Skipper and I have been friends for, frankly, 64 years, from literally the days that we were born, and our mothers, I think, pushed us together in strollers along the streets. They did have streets. In Newport News, Virginia, we even wore shoes and socks and other such things. And I take particular pride in all that you've accomplished in so many ways through Camp Ramah, through the foundation, and the ongoing efforts that you put into helping to create a strong and vibrant Jewish people through this medium and others. And it is always an honor to be here in these kinds of settings and be able, Skip, to recognize you in this way. I actually don't have the chance every day to recognize someone who I've been friendly with for 60+ years, so it's really a special pleasure. I myself have participated in camps. My children have. I worked actually at Ramah, the Berkshires, a number of years ago, at Camp Kutz, at Warwick, and in Great Barrington at our Reform Movement camps. My children have attended Ramah in Ojai, Ramah of the Berkshires, Young Judea, Camp Tel Yehuda, Camp Newman. I was trying to make a list of all the different places where my children have been, and I know that on a personal level, my family has prospered immensely in terms of the Jewish commitments of our children from these camps. I want just very briefly to follow up on the point that Arnie made and to indicate why is it that camps are really so crucial. And in a sense, I really am just going to try to give it a different historical kind of spin. And here I would look for a moment to 2 books written by one of my teachers, Professor Jacob Katz, the late Professor Katz, from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And one of his books was entitled Exclusiveness and Tolerance, another book, Tradition and Crisis. But part of what Professor Katz points to in both of these books that look at the transition of Jewish life from the Middle Ages into the modern period is that part of what is different, and again, it echoes what Arnie said just a few moments ago, It echoes the notion that what we have seen occur in the modern world as Jewish life has become transformed, as we've moved from medievalism into modernity and now into postmodernity in the 21st century, is that the holistic way of life that formerly marked the Jewish people and the Jewish community, where what occurred in the home was echoed then, what occurred in the street, and then what occurred in the institutions of the community, and there was a holistic Jewish life. Part of what modernity did is that modernity served as the solvent in which this type of holistic way of Jewish life, where the values of the institutions in which Jews participated, the home, the street, were, as it were, all one, and Jewish identity, Jewish knowledge, Jewish commitment, and Jewish observance were in effect reinforced as you move from one institution into the other. The reality is, in the world in which we live, with modernity and secularization, it is not that religion has disappeared, but as Chancellor Eisen explained, and as he and Steve Cohen and others have written about so brilliantly, life has become divided. It has become bifurcated in many ways. What camps can do, and I think our community has now come to understand this, and certainly the fabulous growth of this Foundation for Jewish Camps, the work of Jim Joseph and other foundations that have been mentioned here today, all indicate or express a recognition that camps are absolutely crucial in being able to create, as the mottos of some camps put it, a holistic way of Jewish life, where the kinds of activities that Chancellor Eisen described a moment ago can take place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the result is a commitment, a sense of Jewishness that emerges, a formation of Jewish identity that simply cannot be paralleled anywhere else in the world in which our children and young adults grow up, because frankly, we are not able to replicate these 24/7 conditions in any other part of our life. The Jewish community has thankfully recognized in the last several years that camps are crucial for the formation of Jewish commitment and identity for young Jews of all ages as we emerge into the 21st century. And it is for this reason that camps are not only important, but absolutely crucial and at the forefront of forging Jewish identity, Jewish commitments for our people as we move on into the next decades of this third millennium of the Common Era. I would emphasize again that camps are not the only vehicle for achieving this kind of identity, but camps are a necessary condition if what we are going to do is to achieve a new generation of committed Jews. And for that reason, it is absolutely crucial that the work in which all of us in this room are engaged continue. At Hebrew Union College, we are, of course, very, very proud and very happy that, quite frankly, the grants from the Jim Joseph Foundation have allowed us to engage much more in experiential education. One of our faculty, Melissa, is here who works diligently in this area. We have new certificates in experiential education and also in adolescent and young adults. We are proud that we can be among the institutions that will foster these 700 new professionals who we hope will emerge and work in the field in the years to come. You people will be absolutely crucial, and these graduates will, in being able to foster new Jewish experiences, identities, commitments, modelings for our young people as a new generation of Jews emerges. In the end, I would make one other point, and I say this as a denominational leader who certainly is committed in my heart and soul to the reform movement and its institutions. But I would remind all of us here that the words of Rabbi Leo Beck are well worth remembering. Rabbi Beck, who was the greatest leader of German Judaism during its time of greatest trial, and who was ultimately incarcerated in Theresienstadt, where 3 of his sisters perished. Rabbi Beck, at the end of the war, said that what he was completely opposed to after he survived was what he called an adjectival Judaism, a Judaism where the adjective, reform, conservative, orthodox, Zionist, renewal, was more important than the noun, Judaism. Those of us in this room, in this foundation, Jeremy, is ultimately committed to that notion The recognition that, of course, denominations and particular ideological commitments are significant. Many of us devote our heart and soul to these denominations and particular commitments every single day of our life. But what we need to remember, as Chancellor Eisen pointed out, is that our ultimate commitment is to a God who has embraced us in covenantal love and covenantal demand, so that the beliefs that stand at the very heart of our religious tradition, the beliefs that stand at the very heart of our commitment to Klal Yisrael, the totality of the Jewish people, can be expressed both in our movements and certainly beyond in the camps that so many of you represent. The last message that I would deliver today then is just simply one word of Torah. Jeremy, in his wonderful remarks at the beginning, pointed out the Havdalah ceremony that takes place and is observed every Shabbat, but certainly at our camps. I would give you one word of Torah in which I would conclude these opening remarks. In the Mishnah, there is a machloket, there is an argument over what the formula ought to be over the recitation of the blessing over fire when we kindle the candle at the end of Havdalah. The one halachic requirement for the Havdalah candle is it has to have more than one wick. It can have 30 wicks, it can have 3 wicks, it can have 6 wicks, but it cannot have just one wick. It has to have more. And a great rabbi in the 19th century, the Chatam Sofer, Rabbi Moses Schreiber of Pressburg, commented on the debate in the Mishnah in offering a commentary as to why the halakha demands more than one wick. He pointed out that Beit Shammai, the house of Shammai, asserted that the blessing should be, praise to you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, Melech HaOlam, Baram or Ha'esh. God, you created, past tense, Ma'or, singular, the light of the fire. On the other hand, Beit Hillel recited the words that, of course, we use in our ceremony today, Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh. God creates present tense, not created past tense, but creates Ma'orei Ha'esh, the lights, plural, of the fire. And the reason for this, the Chatam Sofer said, and the reason the tradition follows Beit Shammai, is that in Jewish religious tradition, there have to be 2 wicks for the Havdalah candle because one wick represents the Aish, the fire, the light with which God has graced humankind. But in the end, the challenge comes to be, how is that light going to be used? And that we as human beings are shutafim, we are partners with God in the very work of creation, so that the one wick symbolizes the light, the fire, that God freely gives to all of humankind. Unlike Greek mythology, where Prometheus has to steal the fire from the gods and then is punished eternally, within Jewish religious tradition, we believe that God sees us and blesses us with divine love and makes us partners with the divine in acts of creation in this world. But in the end, the challenge remains to human beings as shutafim, as covenantal partners with God, to employ that fire creatively and positively so that that fire can illuminate and shine in the world. The Foundation for Jewish Camps attempts to do this. We thank our partners in the Jim Joseph Foundation and in the other foundations who help to support this enterprise. And to all of you, I would say, Chizku v'imsu, may you be strong and of good courage, and may together we continue to work in these important and vital ways on behalf of our people. Thank you.
Let me just make clear that I'm the president of Yeshiva University. And I'm a little annoyed, David, that you didn't thank me for giving you the Dvar Torah. I also think it's wonderful to be in Chip's presence. I say that as someone who's received $15 million from Chip. And if you notice, we're pretty serious, and Chip always has a smile on his face. That's because Chip gives it away. But it is a privilege. It's multiple privileges today. It's a privilege to be at the Foundation for Jewish Camp, which has been really one of the most important new institutions of promoting and projecting, not just because of the importance of Jewish camping, but to remind the Jewish people that there's more to do and that we can do it. Secondly, to be in the presence of seriously, Dr. Adelsberg, who is a great educator, and he's also educating those who want to help education, and an extraordinary partner. Many of you have had opportunities to deal with different foundations, and there's all kinds of issues about how one deals with foundations. I do speak for my colleagues when I say that dealing with the Jim Joseph Foundation through dealing with Chip and his team is both a wonderful challenge and a joyous challenge and an ultimate partnership, and that's what you hope for with funders of all types, and that's really great. And finally, acharon chaviv, a personal privilege for me to periodically, and maybe not often enough, share a podium with my two esteemed, revered friends and colleagues who have given so much of themselves for the future of the Jewish people. In conclusion, you took my line, I had to do something. So I also wanted to show my relevance. So a few weeks ago, my BlackBerry turned into an iPhone. And thank you very, very much. And on the iPhone, there is this wonderful thing called Notes. And when you press on it, you can actually, take notes of what you want to say. And I decided how cool, because I have a chief of staff named Josh Joseph who does this all the time on his iPad. And when he gives speeches, he gives it with his iPad. Now, I didn't bring my iPad, and I wrote down all these notes, and it's great. And then I realized that as I'm here talking to you and moving this up and down, after about 12 seconds, it goes dark. And in order to get back to it, I have to push the start, slide it over. So I spent time copying over what was on. This is how technology has transformed our lives. And of course, I can't read my own handwriting anymore because it's but what an honor to be with so many of you who are my partners in raising our children. And that's just a critical thing. And all the wonderful things they said I was planning to say. But I want to talk seriously about the fact that for us to survive, and frankly, it's not enough for us to survive, right? God gave Noah, after the flood, Sheva Mitzvot, 7 commandments that are the basic survival commandments so that humankind doesn't kill each other. But to Abraham and Sarah, he gave Taryag Mitzvot, 613, for us to thrive, not just survive. So how pathetic if we think that we're in the business of figuring out how the Jewish people survive. We have to make sure that the Jewish people thrives and embraces Taryag Mitzvot, the entire story of our people, and as David so beautifully puts it, our covenantal responsibilities to partner with the Ribbono Shel Olam, with God in advancing civilization and in bringing light to the world. At a Havdalah, at a campfire, or the most meaningful experience for my children at Camp Moshava, at a shmutz. Do all of you know what a shmutz is? I'll leave it to your imagination. Yes, that's a Moshava, of course. But, and I do believe that camp has always been a critical element in the purposeful upbringing of Jewish children. I think now, as some of the dams are down and some of the givens that we have generations that are born and brought up with no sense of history and no Jewish memory, that the experience of community and the experience of content and the experience of the Jewish life cycle through the week and through the day is so critical, and with or without a rich formal education to accompany it, the camp experience is simply, I think, essential for our children to be able to model Jewishness and to be able to model community, both elements which are essential for us to thrive as we move into the future. Now, I know we used to call this work informal education, and now we call it experiential education. And I think that it's important to call it something new, because with calling it something new comes, frankly, a renewed determination to recognize it as professional as it is and to back it up with the educational and research data and processes that enable you to do your work in the best of all possible ways. Different than Arnie and David, I have undergraduate students in profusion. We have over 3,000 undergraduates, and I would tell you that the vast majority of them grew up in Jewish summer camp, and the vast majority of them serve as counselors in Jewish summer camp. And I think I look at it and say there is so much that camp achieves and so much more that it can achieve, not just with resources, but with our thinking together of methodologies and technologies and practices, training opportunities, rigorous evaluation that helps us really achieve our goals. I always find in every speech a chance to put in my favorite comment from the Mad Hatter: if you don't know where you're going, any road you take will get you there. And camp is more than a 4 or an 8 week break for parents. It really is an immersive experience in Jewish life, and I think it's much too important for us to just repeat each year's program each year. And I think it's also much too important for us not to really think about the classical ways that we go through building community. What are our plans? What are our goals? How are we going to measure our accomplishments? How do we train those? How do we realize that we're dealing with young lives and there are the peripheral issues of making sure that we keep them healthy, emotionally, physically, sexually, morally, and there is no, outside the home, there is no more complete and total experience than the camp experience to model that and to promote it, and how critically important that therefore is. When I used to work for the Hillel Foundation in the glory days, in my glory days, the mission statement of Hillel was to maximize the number of Jews doing Jewish with other Jews. And when I think about what you do in camp and what you should do in camp, I think about, frankly, what I have tried with my colleagues to make more and more of the mission statement of Yeshiva University. It is exactly that. It's not to settle and make excuses for numbers that are diminished. It's to maximize. It's not just to give people a Jewish identity. It's to get them to savor doing Jewish, not being Jewish or describing themselves as Jewish or having Jewish as one of the adjectives in their own individualized identities. But to say, I'm going to do Jewish, and so important, and here I'm going to show my age, with other Jews. I don't resonate with those in our community who talk about Judaism as having to now be an atomized, individualized identity, that it's one piece of a component of multiple identities that make up who you are. I really think that it's the core identity, and I think it can't be an identity that is individualized. I think it can be personal, but it's only personal when it's part of a kehillah kadosha, of a sacred community, and I think we need that. I did want to read to you, if you'll just indulge me, one page of an essay by Rav Soloveitchik, in an essay that actually is called A Tribute to the Rebbetzin of Talna, and I find it very meaningful in thinking about experiential education. He was talking about his father and his mother, and just bear with me. People are mistaken in thinking that there's only one Masorah, one tradition, and one Masorah community, the community of the fathers. It is not true. We have two Masorot, two traditions, two communities. The Masorah community of the fathers and that of the mothers. Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, representing the women and the men, hear, my son, the instruction of the father, Musar Avicha, and forsake not the teaching of the mother, Torat Imecha, Shma B'ni, from Proverbs. And what's the difference between these two Masorot? Between these two traditions? What's the distinction between Musar Avicha and Torat Imecha? Let us explore what one learns from the father and what one learns from the mother. One learns much from father: how to read a text, the Bible or the Talmud, how to comprehend, how to analyze, how to conceptualize, how to classify, how to infer, how to apply, etc. One also learns from father what to do and what not to do, what is morally right and what is morally wrong. Father teaches the son the discipline of thought as well as the discipline of action. Father's tradition is an intellectual, moral one. That is why it's identified with musar, which is the biblical term for discipline. What is Torat Imecha? What kind of a Torah does the mother pass on? I admit that I'm not able to define precisely the Masoretic role of the Jewish mother. Only by circumscription I hope to be able to explain it. Permit me to draw upon my own experiences. I used to have long conversations with my mother. In fact, it was a monologue rather than a dialogue. She talked and I happened to overhear. What did she talk about? I must use a halachic term in order to answer this question. She talked me'inyana diyoma, of the events of the day. I used to watch her arranging the house in honor of a holiday. I used to see her recite prayers. I used to watch her recite the Sedra every Friday night, and I still remember the nostalgic tune. I learned from her very much. Most of all, I learned that Judaism expresses itself not only in formal compliance with the law, but also in a living experience. She taught me that there is a flavor, a scent, and warmth to mitzvot. I learned from her the most important thing in life, to feel the presence of the Almighty and the gentle pressure of His hand resting upon my frail shoulders. Without her teachings, which were quite often transmitted to me in silence, I would have grown up a soulless being, dry and insensitive. The fathers taught generations how to observe the Shabbat. Mothers taught generations how to greet the Shabbat and how to enjoy her 24-hour presence. Make no mistake, I firmly believe that we need Musar Avicha and Torah Timecha, that we need both. I am an absolute believer that we have to do everything in our power to convince our children from all walks of the Jewish community to have a rich day school education. I don't think we can be whole without it, and I think we all have responsibilities to do that. But even with that, so much more so without that, the camping experience, both can convey both Musar Avicha and Torah Timecha. That's why you're here. I have 6 children, thank God, and 3 children-in-law so far, and 3 8/9 grandchildren. Please God. Aside from the 3 8/9 grandchildren, all of them have been shaped by their camping experiences. I have to confess to having only attended Pinsley Day Camp, but I worked at Camp Marasha, and my children have defined themselves through Camps Marasha and Moshavan, Stone, and Masora, and others, which are in so many ways interchangeable, all distinct. I love a bumper sticker I have that says, always remember you're unique just like everyone else. But how much it meant, how much I need to say thank you. So my parting Dvar Torah will be that in next week's Parsha, in Pikudei, is it Pikudei? No, I'm sorry, in last week's Parsha, in Kitisa, we have Moshe Rabbeinu descending from Mount Sinai after receiving the Torah the second time. And the Torah tells us that when he descends, there were karnei or. His face radiated with radiant light that stayed with him forever as a result of receiving the Torah. But there's an interesting and maybe perplexing reality. Moshe came down from Har Sinai with those radiances of light only the second time he went up. The first time he ascended the mountain and came down with Aseret HaDibrot, with the 10 Commandments, he just had a face. Must have been good looking, but it was just a face. It was the second time that he had Karnei Or, and the commentators ask why. So the first time Moshe went up the mountain, he received the 10 Commandments and the Torah that God wrote himself, that God hewed out of stone, that God engraved so you could see it the same way on every side. And we know the story of what happened with those 2 tablets and what the children of Israel did when the Torah that God fashioned was brought down. The second time, God instructs Moses to prepare the tablets and to write the Torah. The second time on Mount Sinai represents not a giving over, but an embrace of a partnership between God and the human. And when that happens, there's radiance. And what you do is not give things over. You create community. You share it. You create radiance. Thank you.
It's just such a pleasure to be in the company of leaders who speak with conviction and persuasion and passion, and I always learn when I'm with these gentlemen. And we're all lifelong learners, so it's a pretty extraordinary opportunity, which I want to give you. We will curtail, as I knew I was going to have to do, the discussion that we're going to have among one another, and just in a few minutes turn to the audience, and I guess there might be some feeds on questions as well, because we don't know what the most important questions are to you. And we want to get to that, so we're going to take 20 minutes or so to do that. To begin, though, I'd like to ask any one of you, or all of you, to respond to what is the role in overnight camping for Israel education, and how, if you know, are you educating your experiential educators who might be in that setting to deal with an issue that is prominent for all of us and just intractably difficult?
I don't think you can do